When the night grows deeper, silence takes over the world, but some voices still whisper in the dark. Hidden within America lie countless mysteries, where lost trains, haunted stations, and cursed spirits still wander. Tonight, we will take you on a terrifying journey, a story where the line between truth and the unknown fades away. If you have the courage, let's begin this haunted journey. And before we start, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more chilling horror stories every day. It was a bitterly cold night in Chicago, the kind where the wind cuts through your coat and makes every step feel heavier. I had just arrived at the edge of the city, drawn here by whispers I couldn't ignore. Stories about a phantom train that appeared only to those who dared to search for it. They said it ran along abandoned tracks near the old freight yards, carrying passengers who were never seen again. I walked past cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights, my breath clouding in the icy air. The city felt different here, almost silent, as if it were holding its breath. A distant rumble caught my attention, and I froze. At first, I thought it was a freight train somewhere far off, but the sound was too deliberate, almost like it knew I was listening. Curiosity overpowered caution. I followed the noise, my footsteps echoing on the empty streets. As I approached the tracks, the rumble grew louder, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. And then I saw it. A train, sleek and black, emerging from the shadows, its windows dark, reflecting nothing of the world around it. I hesitated, my heart hammering in my chest. There was no station, no one to be seen, yet the train waited, as if inviting me aboard. Against every rational thought, I stepped closer, drawn by an invisible force. The air grew colder, and a faint, metallic smell filled my nostrils. I knew I should turn back, but my curiosity was stronger than fear. A sudden shriek of the wind, or was it something else, made me stumble. The train's horn echoed unnaturally, a sound that seemed to pierce my very soul. I realized, with a chill that ran down my spine, that this was no ordinary train. It belonged to a world just beyond the one I knew, a place where lost souls traveled endlessly, and time had no meaning. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform, or at least what I thought was a platform. My surroundings blurred. The city noises faded. In their place, there was only the hum of the train, the whisper of shadows, and the feeling that I had crossed a line from which there was no return. As I boarded, the doors closed behind me with a soft hiss. Inside, the train was silent and empty, yet I could feel eyes watching me from the darkness. The air was thick, almost alive, carrying whispers I couldn't understand. I took a tentative step forward, and the train lurched, moving without any sound from the outside. I had no idea where it would take me. All I knew was that the journey had begun, and whatever lay ahead, I was no longer in the world I knew. The interior of the train was unlike anything I had ever seen. The walls were dark, polished wood that seemed to absorb the faint light from above, while the floorboards creaked softly under my weight. There were rows of empty seats, all facing forward, yet no matter how I looked, I could sense a presence behind me. I spun around several times, but the carriage was empty, or so it appeared. A sudden chill ran down my spine as a low whisper brushed against my ear. "Welcome," it said, though there was no one there. I froze, trying to convince myself it was just the wind or my imagination. But then the shadows along the walls began to shift, almost imperceptibly, as if something unseen was moving in tandem with me. I found a seat near the window and sat down, hoping that staying put might help me understand what was happening. The glass was fogged, but outside, the world was unrecognizable. It wasn't Chicago anymore, or at least not the city I knew. The skyline twisted and distorted, buildings bending at impossible angles, and streets wound like serpents in the darkness. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the aisle. At first, it looked like a man in a long coat, but the features were blurred, wavering as though painted on water. My heart raced. I wanted to speak, to ask who or what it was, but my voice caught in my throat. The figure stopped beside me, and a cold breeze swept through the carriage. I felt its gaze, though I could see nothing clearly. "Many come looking," the figure whispered. "Few return." The words were like shards of ice. Before I could ask anything, it vanished, dissolving into the shadows as if it had never been there. The train moved faster, the hum intensifying, vibrating through my chest. I noticed other seats, filled with faint, ghostly outlines of people, all staring straight ahead. None acknowledged me. Their faces were hollow, their eyes empty, yet I could feel their longing, their despair. I realized with a sickening dread that these were the souls trapped here, passengers lost to the phantom train. A loud metallic clang echoed from the next carriage, startling me. Against every instinct, I rose and walked toward the sound. The air grew colder with each step, my breath forming thick clouds that hung like spirits in the dim light. When I reached the door, it creaked open to reveal a room filled with old luggage, newspapers, and personal belongings, abandoned by travelers long gone. Some items shimmered with a faint, unnatural glow, as if holding memories of the people who once owned them. I felt a tug at my sleeve, and this time, there was no shadow, just a faint pressure, a pull urging me further. I hesitated, but curiosity, stronger than fear, pushed me onward. I had entered a world of the forgotten, a place where the living and the dead brushed against each other, and there was no turning back. I stepped cautiously into the next carriage, the door groaning as it swung open. The air here was heavier, charged with something I couldn't name, an energy that pressed against my chest and made every heartbeat thunder in my ears. The seats were gone, replaced by a narrow corridor lined with faded wallpaper that seemed to ripple as if alive. A faint whispering filled the space, just at the edge of hearing. Words tangled together, some clear, others fragmented. "Lost? Find me? Don't leave!" My skin prickled. I knew instinctively that these voices were not friendly. They were warnings, desperate cries from souls trapped for who knows how long. I walked slowly, my hand trailing along the wall, feeling the texture change from smooth to coarse. Shadows twisted and stretched unnaturally, stretching into shapes that resembled figures. I thought I saw a child, small and pale, peering around a corner before vanishing like smoke. My heart skipped. I wanted to call out, but my voice felt swallowed by the shadows. Then I noticed a door at the far end of the corridor, slightly ajar. A dim light spilled out, flickering like candle flames in the distance. Drawn to it, I approached cautiously, each step echoing unnervingly. Peering inside, I found a small compartment filled with old photographs and letters, scattered haphazardly across the floor. Faces of strangers stared at me from yellowed paper, their eyes hollow and haunting, yet filled with a silent plea. The letters were faded, some torn, but I could make out fragments. "Don't forget me. They took me. Help!" A cold gust swept through the compartment, scattering the papers, and I felt a presence behind me. I spun around, nothing. Only the whispering remained, now louder, almost urgent. I realized with growing dread that the train was alive in some way, aware of me, and perhaps judging whether I belonged in this place or would be swallowed by it. I backed out of the compartment slowly, glancing over my shoulder. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, the flickering light at the end wavering like a mirage. And then I heard it, a soft, almost childlike voice whispering my name. "Don't leave," it said, pulling at the edges of my sanity. I had no idea what awaited me ahead, but I knew one thing. The deeper I went, the harder it would be to return to the world I once knew. I continued down the endless corridor, each step heavier than the last. The whispering had grown into an almost tangible presence, brushing against my skin and threading through my thoughts. I could feel the train itself pulsing, as though it had a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly alive. At a bend in the corridor, I noticed a faint glow seeping through a crack in the wall. Curiosity won over fear, and I pressed closer. The wall wasn't solid. It was a hidden door. Pushing it open revealed a small chamber filled with clocks, all ticking at different speeds. Some spun wildly, while others barely moved. The room smelled of rust and something more ancient, like forgotten memories. In the center, a figure sat hunched over a table, writing in a book with a quill that seemed impossibly old. His back was to me, but I sensed its awareness immediately. Every tick of the clock seemed to echo in the room, each second dragging me further into a strange, suspended reality. I stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. "Time doesn't move here like it does outside," the figure said without turning. Its voice was hollow, echoing as if coming from far away. I froze. "Those who board this train are trapped between moments, between worlds. Few escape and even fewer remember." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Why does this train exist?" I managed to whisper. The figure finally turned. Its face was gaunt, eyes deep wells of sorrow and wisdom. "To collect the lost, to remind the living of what they abandon. Some come seeking answers, others are simply pulled by curiosity. Either way, they are caught in the endless journey." A sudden jolt shook the train, rattling the clocks and sending a shiver through my spine. Shadows in the room seemed to bend toward me, as though curious themselves. I realized with a sickening clarity that the train's secret was not just in its passengers, but in itself. A sentient, unforgiving entity that fed on fear, wonder, and the unwillingness to turn back. I stumbled out of the chamber, the hidden door clicking shut behind me. The corridor stretched on, longer than before, and the whispering returned, now insistent, almost pleading. Somewhere ahead, I knew, the next revelation awaited, but with it, the danger grew. Whatever this train was, I had only just begun to understand its true nature. I pressed onward, my footsteps hesitant but relentless. The corridor twisted unnaturally, turning corners that should have been impossible. Outside the windows, the world had shifted again. No longer the distorted skyline of Chicago, but a foggy, empty landscape that stretched endlessly. Shadows moved just beyond my vision, teasing me with shapes that vanished when I tried to focus. As I walked, I began to notice faces in the fog, vague, pale silhouettes that seemed to hover just beyond the glass. They stared at me silently, some with pleading eyes, others with expressions of rage or sorrow. I wanted to turn away, but something in them called to me, whispering that I could help, or perhaps that I would join them if I faltered. A sudden movement caught my eye. One figure stepped closer, its features sharpening into that of a young girl, her eyes hollow yet piercing. She raised a tiny hand, pointing toward the next carriage. "Follow me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the train. I hesitated, fear clawing at my chest, but curiosity pushed me forward. I entered the next carriage, and the fog seemed to seep inside, curling around my ankles like cold water. The air was thick with a damp, metallic smell. The seats were gone, replaced by remnants of personal belongings. Small trinkets, worn shoes, and faded photographs. Each item vibrated with an energy I couldn't explain, memories trapped in the objects themselves. Then I heard a voice behind me, soft and distant. "They watch," it said. I turned sharply, but again no one was there. Only the fog swirling and shifting as though alive. My heart raced. I realized that the train itself was aware of my presence, that every movement I made was noted, every glance remembered. The little girl appeared again, now sitting on one of the scattered trunks, her hollow eyes fixed on me. "Don't get lost," she said. "Some who wander too far never return." Her warning sent a shiver down my spine, yet I felt compelled to continue, to uncover the secrets that the train had hidden from the world outside. As I moved deeper into the carriage, the whispering intensified, merging with the fog and the shadows. I knew I had entered a realm where the living and the lost coexisted, a place where time and reality bent around the train's will. And somewhere ahead, I could feel, lay a truth far darker than anything I had encountered so far. I stepped into the next carriage and immediately felt a weight pressing down on me, as if the air itself was dense with memory. The walls were lined with mirrors, but the reflections they cast were not my own. Instead, I saw scenes from my past, some long forgotten, some moments I wished I could erase. Every misstep, every regret, every fleeting happiness was displayed like a silent gallery. As I moved forward, I noticed shadows lingering in the corners of the mirrors. They seemed to mimic the faces of people I knew or thought I knew. Occasionally, one would move independently, stretching its arm out toward me before disappearing into the glass. The whispers were louder here, now forming fragmented sentences. Remember, forgive, stay. I paused by a large mirror at the end of the carriage. In its reflection, the train behind me seemed endless, stretching into infinity, but the figure of the little girl appeared again. This time, she was standing beside me in the mirror, though not in reality. Her hollow eyes locked onto mine. "Every passenger leaves a trace," she said softly. "Some are welcome, others forgotten." A sudden jolt shook the train, rattling the mirrors. I stumbled, and the reflection shifted, showing me a version of myself older, gaunt, and lost in despair. Panic surged through me. "This isn't real," I whispered, trying to remind myself of the world outside. But I knew better. Everything here felt impossibly real, the emotions raw, the memories burning through me. I moved on, leaving the mirrors behind, but the sense of being watched never left. Each step forward revealed more artifacts of past passengers. Shoes lined neatly along the walls, broken toys, letters scribbled with frantic handwriting. I realized the train was not only carrying the lost, it was keeping them, holding fragments of their lives for eternity. At the far end of the carriage, a narrow doorway beckoned. Beyond it, I could feel something ancient and powerful, a presence that had been waiting for me since I first stepped aboard. Every instinct screamed to turn back, yet I felt an inexorable pull forward. Whatever lay ahead, I knew it would change everything, and perhaps, like so many before me, I might never leave the train the same as when I entered. The next carriage opened into a vast, dimly lit hall, its ceiling lost in shadow. Rows of seats lined either side, but unlike the previous carriages, these were occupied. Faint, translucent figures sat silently, staring straight ahead. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow, some with expressions of despair, others strangely calm. Each seemed trapped in a private torment, unaware of my presence. I stepped cautiously among them, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet. Whispers flitted around me, fragmented and unintelligible, yet charged with emotion, grief, regret, fear. One figure turned slightly, revealing a face I thought I recognized, only to vanish the next instant. Panic surged. The train seemed to toy with me, showing fragments of lives long lost. A soft sob drew my attention to the far end of the carriage. A young man, ghostly and frail, clutched a tattered photograph. His lips moved silently, mouthing words I could not hear. I approached, and the temperature dropped sharply, my breath fogging before me. He looked up, eyes empty yet piercing. "They never leave," he whispered, voice echoing strangely. "Once you board, the train remembers you." I stepped back, overwhelmed, and the figures shifted as if alive, leaning slightly toward me, their presence pressing on my chest. It was clear. The train wasn't just a passage. It was a prison, a vessel for the lost and forgotten. I realized that with every step I took, I was being drawn deeper into its memory, risking becoming part of the endless lament that filled the halls. I left the hall behind, my footsteps echoing down a narrow, shadowed corridor. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if breathing. Whispers followed me, swirling around my ears, sometimes urgent, sometimes mournful. "Stay, don't leave, join us." I shivered, realizing the train's presence was conscious, watching, testing me. The corridor twisted unnaturally, bending in ways that made no sense. Windows along the side showed only darkness, yet I occasionally glimpsed shadowy figures moving beyond the glass, vanishing whenever I tried to focus. The air grew colder, the hum of the train vibrating through the floor, as if its heartbeat matched my own. Ahead, a faint light glimmered, beckoning me forward. I approached slowly, and the shadows lengthened, reaching toward me like fingers. Every instinct screamed to stop, but curiosity and fear propelled me onward. The whispers merged into a cacophony, repeating my name, weaving threads of my own thoughts with the voices of the lost. Finally, I reached a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I entered another carriage. This one filled with personal belongings. Broken toys, old shoes, letters yellowed with age. The items seemed to hum softly, vibrating with the memories of those who had once owned them. I understood then. The train preserved fragments of lives, holding them in stasis, a living archive of the forgotten. A chill ran down my spine as I stepped further inside. Somewhere deep within the train, I could feel an intelligence, ancient and patient, guiding me or luring me toward a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. Yet there was no turning back. Every step forward bound me tighter to the endless journey of the phantom train. The carriage I entered next was colder than any I had felt before. Mist swirled along the floor, curling around my ankles like ghostly fingers. I could hear distant cries and murmurs, some familiar, some alien. The whispers here were insistent, almost desperate. Remember us? Don't forget. Stay forever. Ghostly figures drifted among the seats, their forms hazy and shifting. Some turned toward me, eyes hollow yet filled with longing, while others continued in silence, trapped in eternal loops of their final moments. I could feel their sorrow pressing against me, a tangible weight that made my chest ache. On a small table in the center of the carriage lay personal effects. A cracked watch, a child's doll, a notebook filled with scribbles. Each item pulsed faintly, resonating with the memories of its owner. As I picked up the notebook, I felt a tug, almost as if the train itself wanted me to read it. The pages were filled with frantic writing. Confessions, regrets, pleas for escape. The words seemed to burn into my mind, each one a fragment of someone's soul. A figure appeared at the far end of the carriage. A man, hunched and spectral, clutching a photograph to his chest. He looked directly at me, his mouth moving soundlessly before a whisper reached my ears. We are the forgotten, the lost, and the train keeps us so that no one remembers outside these walls. His eyes glimmered with pain, and then he dissolved into the mist, leaving only an echo of his warning behind. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. The train was not merely a passage, it was a liminal realm, a space between life and death, holding fragments of those who had been taken. Each step forward made it harder to distinguish my reality from theirs. I realized that continuing meant risking becoming one of the forgotten, yet some dark curiosity pushed me onward, deeper into the train's endless secrets. The next carriage was unlike any I had encountered so far. Its walls were lined with hundreds of clocks, each ticking at its own erratic pace. Some spun wildly, their hands whirling in impossible directions, while others ticked so slowly it felt as if time itself had stopped. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of rust and age, and a strange humming vibrated through the floor beneath me. In the center of the room, a figure hunched over a massive desk, writing feverishly in a leather-bound book. His back was to me, yet I felt its awareness immediately. Every tick of the clocks seemed to echo in the room, stretching seconds into eternity. I stepped closer, my curiosity outweighing my fear. Time is different here, the figure said without looking up. Its voice was hollow, distant, as if coming from another dimension. Those who board this train are suspended between moments, trapped in a limbo of memory and consequence. Few escape and even fewer remember. I swallowed hard. Why does this train exist? I whispered. The figure finally turned, revealing a gaunt, sorrowful face. To collect the lost, to remind the living of what they abandon. Some come seeking answers, others are drawn by curiosity. Either way, they are caught in the endless journey. A sudden jolt shook the carriage, rattling the clocks and sending a shiver through my spine. The shadows seemed to lean closer, bending toward me as if alive. I realized with growing dread that the train itself was not simply a vessel. It was a sentient, relentless entity, feeding on fear, curiosity, and the unwillingness to turn back. I stumbled out of the room, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. The corridor stretched on, longer and darker than before, and the whispers returned, louder and more urgent. I knew the next carriage would hold another secret, and with it, the danger would grow ever greater. I entered the next carriage, and the atmosphere shifted again. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of old paper. Shelves lined the walls, filled with journals, letters, and photographs, each humming faintly with the memories they contained. It felt as if the carriage itself had become a library of lost lives. As I walked among the shelves, whispers emerged from the objects. Fragments of conversations, laughter, and cries reached my ears, blending with my own thoughts. Some seemed familiar, like echoes of people I had known. Others were utterly alien. Each artifact radiated an emotional weight that made my chest tighten. I picked up a photograph of a young boy, smiling but with eyes far too solemn for his age. The image vibrated softly in my hands, and I could feel a sadness that went beyond the photo, beyond the boy. The whispers grew louder. Remember us? I nearly dropped it, my heart racing. Suddenly, the air shifted, colder and heavier. A shadow passed across the room, moving independently from any light source. I turned but saw nothing, only the shelves stretching endlessly, as if the carriage itself had no end. The whispering intensified, merging with my own heartbeat, until I could barely distinguish one from the other. At the far end, a faint light glimmered. I approached cautiously and found a small alcove with a chair and a single open journal. The writing inside shifted as I looked, forming words meant for me. "You are not safe. Keep moving, or you will become part of the collection." I felt a shiver run through me. The train was alive, aware, and patient, and it had begun to mark me as one of its own. I stepped into the next carriage, and the dim light above flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows that seemed almost sentient. The air was colder here, carrying a faint metallic scent, and the soft hum of the train felt louder, resonating through my bones. Every step echoed unnaturally, as if the space itself were expanding and contracting with the train's movements. Rows of empty seats stretched into darkness, yet I felt eyes upon me, watching, waiting. A low whisper drifted through the carriage. "You shouldn't be here, but now that you are..." It trailed off, leaving a shiver crawling down my spine. I tried to shake the feeling, but every instinct warned me that the train itself was alive, aware of my presence. A shadow flickered at the far end, moving independently of the light. I froze, took shape, momentarily forming the outline of a person, then dissipated into nothing. My heart pounded, but I couldn't turn back. The pull forward was irresistible, a force beyond logic or reason. Somewhere ahead, I sensed a revelation or a trap. The seats began to warp subtly, their edges bending and stretching. Whispers grew louder, forming indistinct sentences that I could almost understand. "Join us, remain, never leave." My chest tightened with each step, but I pressed on, drawn by a dark curiosity that had grown with every carriage. At the very end of the aisle, a door glimmered with an unnatural light. I approached it cautiously, and as I touched the handle, the hum of the train shifted, rising into a dissonant chord. The door swung open to reveal yet another carriage, but this one felt different, alive in a more tangible way. I realized that whatever lay ahead would bring me closer to the heart of the phantom train, and perhaps to a truth too terrifying to face. As I entered the next carriage, a heavy silence fell over me, broken only by the faint hum of the train. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and shadows clung to the corners like living things. I could feel it before I saw it. A presence watching, patient and unyielding. My heart raced. The carriage was sparsely furnished, a few chairs scattered haphazardly. But in every reflective surface, windows, polished wood panels, I saw a figure. It didn't move like the other ghosts. It simply observed, its hollow eyes following me wherever I went. I couldn't tell if it was part of the train or something trapped within it. A whisper brushed past my ear. "You're being tested. I spun around, but the carriage was empty. The figure remained in every reflection, never speaking, just observing. The sense of being measured, evaluated, made my skin crawl. Every step forward felt heavier, as if I were carrying the weight of countless eyes upon me. The hum of the train grew louder, vibrating through my chest. It felt like the carriage itself was aware of my fear, feeding on it, shaping it. Shadows in the corners stretched and contorted, creating faces and forms that vanished the moment I tried to focus. I realized that the train wasn't merely a vessel for the lost. It was sentient, alive, and its attention was now on me. I kept moving, avoiding mirrors when I could, though the feeling of being watched never left. At the far end of the carriage, a faint light beckoned. I knew that beyond it awaited the next layer of the train's secrets, and that each revelation would bind me further to this endless, spectral journey. I stepped into the next carriage, and the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air was thick and electric, carrying a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. The walls were lined with dark, polished wood, and shadows moved along them, writhing and twisting as though alive. I could feel the train's pulse here, strong and unyielding, like the heartbeat of some ancient creature. In the center of the carriage, a faint glow emanated from a circular platform. As I approached, I realized it was a map, an impossible, ever-changing diagram of the train's interior. Carriages seemed to shift and multiply on it, corridors twisting in ways that defied logic. The glow pulsed with a rhythm that matched the hum of the train, drawing me closer. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder, almost deafening. "You belong. You cannot leave. You are ours." I staggered, gripping the edges of the map, trying to ground myself. The shadows around me coalesced briefly into humanoid forms, reaching toward me with elongated fingers before dissolving into darkness. I realized then that the train's heart was not just a location. It was a consciousness, aware of each passenger, each choice, each fleeting thought. It was alive, patient, and insidious. Every step I had taken had led me here, into the very center of its being. The little girl's warnings, the echoes of the lost, the whispering corridors, all of it pointed to this moment. The train knew me, studied me, and was now determining my fate. A sudden jolt shook the carriage violently, sending the map spinning and images flickering across its surface. Shadows leapt from the walls, and I felt a cold, unrelenting pressure pressing down, forcing me to my knees. Somewhere deep inside, I sensed that the ultimate choice was upon me. Continue and risk becoming part of the train forever, or turn back and face consequences I could not yet imagine. I rose slowly from my knees, heart pounding, sweat chilling on my skin. The train's pulse was deafening now, vibrating through every fiber of my being. Shadows swirled around me, whispering my name, taunting, pleading, and warning all at once. The map in the center of the carriage continued to shift, revealing corridors and carriages I hadn't yet discovered, some impossibly long, some looping back upon themselves. The little girl appeared beside me, her hollow eyes staring straight into mine. "This is the last step," she whispered. "Beyond here, you either become part of the train, or you leave changed forever." Her tiny hand reached out, urging me toward a narrow door at the far end of the carriage. I could feel the pull of the train, a magnetic force binding me, drawing me forward. I hesitated, torn between the instinct to flee and the compulsion to understand. Behind me, the shadows of the lost pressed closer, their faces filled with silent anguish. The whispers became louder, now forming coherent words. "Stay, join us. Don't leave." Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped toward the door. The air thickened, and a blinding flash of light engulfed me. For a moment, I felt weightless, suspended between reality and nightmare, my mind swimming with visions of every passenger the train had claimed. Faces of the forgotten swirled around me, their eyes pleading, accusing, and forgiving all at once. And then silence. I stumbled out of the carriage into a dimly lit station, one I vaguely recognized, but it was empty, abandoned, as if frozen in time. The cold night air of Chicago met me, sharp and real, and I realized I was standing at the edge of the world I had known. The train was gone, vanished into the shadows, leaving only faint echoes in my mind. I survived, but I was not the same. Every night, I hear whispers in my dreams, a faint hum, a reminder that somewhere, the phantom train still waits. And I know that curiosity never truly leaves us. It lingers, calling, waiting, just like it did that night in Chicago. The journey had ended, but its memory would haunt me forever.